Margaret sat in her quiet living room, the ticking clock her only company. Once filled with the laughter of family gatherings, her home now felt like a hollow echo of its past. Have you ever felt that sting of loneliness, the kind that creeps in when life shifts and family drifts away? It's a feeling so many of us share, but rarely talk about. Today, we're uncovering 15 simple, transformative ways to reignite connection, purpose, and joy. Let's start with the first step, acknowledging the feeling and embracing the power of change. 1. Acknowledge the feeling without judgment. It was a rainy Wednesday afternoon when Margaret finally admitted to herself that she was lonely. She'd always been strong, the go-to person for her family and friends, but when the kids grew up and moved away, her once busy days began to feel empty. At first, she pushed the feeling aside, convincing herself that loneliness was a sign of weakness, but ignoring it only made it grow. Acknowledging loneliness isn't easy. It requires vulnerability and courage. It's about pausing to sit with the emotion rather than running from it. Margaret realized that naming her loneliness allowed her to take the first step toward change. This simple act of recognition gave her a sense of control. She wasn't just feeling lost. She was ready to face the discomfort and reclaim her days. If you felt that same hollow ache, try taking a moment to reflect on it without judgment. Journaling can be a powerful tool to put those feelings into words. Margaret found that writing down her emotions helped her untangle them, making them feel less overwhelming. When you give yourself the grace to feel, you're planting the seed for growth. 2. Reframe the narrative. For weeks, Margaret wrestled with her feelings, questioning what her life would look like now that family visits were few and far between. One day, while walking through her garden, she had an epiphany. Her once blooming roses had faded, but she noticed tiny green buds sprouting, a reminder that seasons of change bring new growth. Margaret began to reframe her situation. Rather than viewing loneliness as an endpoint, she saw it as an invitation to explore uncharted territory. She reminded herself that this quieter phase of life could be an opportunity to rediscover who she was outside of her roles as a mother and caregiver. You too can find power in shifting your perspective. Ask yourself, what possibilities might this time of solitude hold for me? Reframing doesn't mean dismissing the difficulty of the moment. It means choosing to see it as fertile ground for personal growth. Margaret found hope in the idea that every challenge, even loneliness, carries within it the potential for transformation. 3. Connect through shared stories. Feeling empowered by her new perspective, Margaret decided it was time to reach out. She had heard about a book club at the local library, and with a bit of trepidation, decided to give it a try. On her first day, she almost turned around at the door, nervous about meeting a room full of strangers. But as soon as the discussion started, she realized something profound. Everyone in that room had their own story of loss, love, and resilience. Through shared stories, Margaret felt an immediate sense of connection. She wasn't alone in her struggles. Each member of the group brought their own unique perspective, and together, they created a space of understanding and camaraderie. The simple act of listening to others and sharing her own experiences reminded Margaret of the deep human need for connection. If joining a group feels intimidating, start small. Look for community gatherings, senior groups, or online forums where people share common interests. You might consider a knitting circle, a photography club, or even a virtual community where you can connect from the comfort of your home. The key is finding spaces where you can exchange stories, whether they're about triumphs, challenges, or the small joys of daily life. Margaret's book club became a highlight of her week. She left each meeting feeling lighter, more connected, and inspired by the strength of others. And it didn't stop there. She began building friendships outside the club, inviting members over for tea, and even hosting a book-themed potluck. 4. Volunteer your time and energy. One morning, Margaret came across a flyer in her community center for a program that paired seniors with young students who needed tutoring in reading. At first, she hesitated. What if her skills weren't sharp enough? What if the kids didn't like her? But something about the idea of helping others tugged at her heart, so she signed up. On her first day, she met Jason, a shy 8-year-old who struggled with reading. As they worked together, Margaret noticed how her patience and encouragement lit up his face. Over the weeks, she began to feel something she hadn't in years needed. Volunteering doesn't just benefit the person receiving help, it's a powerful antidote to loneliness. It reminds you of your unique gifts and how much you still have to offer. Whether it's mentoring, helping out at an animal shelter, or knitting blankets for hospitals, giving back helps build a sense of connection and purpose. If you're unsure where to start, consider causes you're passionate about or areas where your skills can shine. For Margaret, watching Jason's confidence grow wasn't just rewarding. It became the highlight of her week. 5. Rediscover an old passion or hobby. As Margaret's confidence grew, she found herself reflecting on a part of her life she'd nearly forgotten, her love of sewing. She'd spent hours at her sewing machine in her younger years, creating clothes for her children and mending anything that needed fixing. But as life got busier, that passion took a back seat. One weekend, inspired by a local quilting group she heard about at the book club, Margaret dusted off her old sewing machine. Her first attempts were clumsy, and her fingers fumbled with the fabric. But as the weeks went by, she fell into a rhythm. Her stitches became straighter, her designs more intricate. It wasn't long before she joined the quilting group and discovered a new community of women who shared her love of creativity. Rekindling an old passion isn't just a way to pass the time. It's a bridge to your past and a path to new friendships. Whether it's gardening, painting, writing, or music, finding time to engage with what you love can spark joy and create new opportunities for connection. For Margaret, sewing became more than a hobby. It was a lifeline. The colorful fabrics and the hum of her machine brought her a sense of peace and accomplishment. And the smile she received when she gifted her quilts to others reminded her how small acts of creativity can spread joy. 6. Set small, achievable goals. Margaret's progress was undeniable, but she still had days when the quiet moments felt overwhelming. On those days, she reminded herself of a simple mantra: start small. She began setting tiny, achievable goals for herself, things that seemed insignificant at first, but had a profound impact over time. Her first goal was to walk to the park 3 times a week. At first, it felt like a chore. She'd grumble as she put on her sneakers and headed out the door. But something magical happened during those walks. She began noticing the changing seasons, the birds singing, and the way the sunlight danced through the trees. It wasn't long before those walks became something she looked forward to. Small goals have a way of building momentum. Once Margaret mastered her walks, she started setting other goals, calling one friend a week, learning a new recipe, and eventually hosting a small dinner party. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, added to her growing sense of confidence. The beauty of small goals is that they're manageable. They don't overwhelm you, and they remind you of your ability to achieve and grow. For Margaret, each step she took, literally and figuratively, was a step toward a more fulfilling life. 7. Attend community events. Margaret had always been shy about venturing out alone, but when she noticed a flyer for a local farmer's market, something told her to give it a try. She remembered the advice from her book club friends: start small and see what happens. On a sunny Saturday morning, she grabbed her reusable bag and headed to the bustling market. The market was alive with chatter and music, the smell of fresh bread and flowers filling the air. Margaret wandered through the stalls, stopping to admire handmade jewelry and local produce. A vendor smiled at her and asked if she'd tried their jam before. That small moment of connection, just a smile and a simple conversation, made her feel seen. As Margaret returned week after week, those small conversations grew. She learned the names of the vendors, shared recipes with fellow shoppers, and even found herself invited to a local gardening workshop by a vendor who noticed her interest in plants. Attending community events like farmers markets, concerts in the park, or craft fairs offers a wonderful way to meet people without the pressure of formal introductions. These spaces are casual, welcoming, and often full of people looking to connect. For Margaret, the farmers market became more than a place to buy produce. It became a gateway to new friendships and opportunities. 8. Nurture existing relationships. After spending years focusing on her family, Margaret realized she'd unintentionally let some of her old friendships fade. While she'd often thought about reaching out, she felt hesitant. What if too much time had passed? What if they didn't want to reconnect? One evening, encouraged by her newfound confidence, Margaret decided to pick up the phone and call her childhood friend, Anne. They hadn't spoken in over a decade, but as soon as Anne answered, the years seemed to melt away. They talked for hours, laughing about old memories and catching up on their lives. By the end of the call, they'd planned a lunch date for the following week. Nurturing existing relationships doesn't have to feel overwhelming. Start with a simple message, a phone call, or even a handwritten letter. Mention a shared memory or something that reminded you of them. It's a heartfelt way to bridge the gap. Margaret soon made it a habit to reconnect with one old friend every few weeks. Not all of them were able to rekindle their bond, but the ones who did brought so much joy back into her life. By tending to these relationships, she realized that time apart doesn't have to mean the end of a friendship. 9. Explore intergenerational friendships. One day, as Margaret watered her garden, she noticed her teenage neighbor, Lily, struggling with a heavy bag of groceries. Without hesitation, Margaret offered to help. As they walked back to Lily's house, they started chatting. Margaret shared stories of how she used to garden with her grandmother, and Lily talked about how she wanted to learn but didn't know where to start. That simple moment sparked an unlikely friendship. Over the weeks, Margaret showed Lily how to plant tomatoes and care for flowers, while Lily helped Margaret with technology, showing her how to use video calls to connect with her children and even how to stream her favorite shows. Intergenerational friendships can be incredibly rewarding, offering a fresh perspective on life and a sense of shared purpose. Younger generations often have so much curiosity and energy to offer, and seniors, in turn, bring wisdom, patience, and life experience. If you don't have a teenage neighbor like Margaret, there are other ways to connect across generations. Community centers, libraries, and schools often have mentorship programs where seniors can share their skills with younger participants. These relationships are built on mutual learning and respect, creating bonds that enrich both lives. For Margaret, her friendship with Lily became a source of inspiration. They learned from each other, laughed together, and created a bond that bridged their generational gap. It reminded Margaret that connection doesn't depend on age. It's about shared moments, curiosity, and kindness. 10. Focus on physical health. Margaret's journey toward better self-care began with a simple commitment to take better care of her body. She'd heard plenty of advice over the years about the importance of exercise, but the thought of joining a gym or doing something strenuous didn't appeal to her. Instead, she started small, incorporating gentle stretches and short walks into her daily routine. One morning, while scrolling through her phone, Margaret stumbled upon a video tutorial for chair yoga. Curious, she gave it a try. To her surprise, the slow, mindful movements felt invigorating, yet relaxing. Over time, her flexibility improved, and she noticed that her energy level started to rise. What began as a hesitant experiment turned into a morning ritual she looked forward to each day. Focusing on physical health doesn't have to mean intense workouts or drastic changes. It's about finding what works for you, whether it's light gardening, dancing to your favorite songs, or joining a gentle exercise class. The key is to stay active in a way that feels enjoyable. For Margaret, her daily yoga routine became a form of self-care that helped her feel more connected to her body and her surroundings. Physical activity doesn't just boost your health. It lifts your mood, sharpens your mind, and reminds you of the strength you still carry within. 11. Prioritize mental health. As Margaret strengthened her body, she began to notice how much lighter she felt emotionally as well. But she also knew that staying mentally healthy required more than physical activity. Loneliness, after all, often starts in the mind, and Margaret wanted to tackle it head-on. She began with something simple: journaling. Each evening, she sat down with a cup of tea and wrote about her day, her thoughts, and her feelings. Some days, her entries were joyful and optimistic. Other days, they were filled with uncertainty. But no matter the mood, putting pen to paper felt like a release. It helped her untangle her emotions and see her challenges more clearly. Margaret also decided to try mindfulness meditation. She downloaded a free app that guided her through short 5-minute meditations. At first, it felt strange to sit quietly with her thoughts, but she gradually noticed how it helped her feel calmer and more present in her day-to-day life. Mental health care is as essential as physical health, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Whether through journaling, meditation, or talking to a trusted friend or therapist, small actions can have a profound impact. For Margaret, these moments of introspection helped her cultivate a sense of inner peace and resilience. 12. Create a cozy and nurturing home environment. As Margaret focused on her well-being, she realized her home, her sanctuary, needed some love too. Over the years, her once vibrant space had become cluttered and uninspiring, filled with items she no longer used but couldn't bring herself to part with. One afternoon, with her favorite playlist in the background, Margaret decided to tackle one small area: her living room. She sorted through stacks of old magazines, reorganized her bookshelves, and replaced faded cushions with cheerful, colorful ones. To her delight, the room instantly felt brighter and more inviting. Margaret didn't stop there. She added cozy touches like soft throws, fresh flowers, and a small corner where she could sit with her tea and a good book. Each change, no matter how small, made her home feel like a space she wanted to spend time in, a space that reflected her personality and brought her joy. Your home is your sanctuary, and making it a place that nurtures you emotionally can make all the difference. Start small, like Margaret, and focus on one area at a time. Whether it's rearranging furniture, adding a new plant, or simply decluttering, these changes can transform your space into a haven of comfort and positivity. 13th, try something completely new. One evening, while scrolling through community events online, Margaret stumbled across an advertisement for a senior travel group. It was a weekend getaway to a charming coastal town, and while the idea intrigued her, doubts crept in. Could she travel alone? Would she fit in with the group? After a bit of self-reflection and encouragement from her book club friends, Margaret signed up. The trip turned out to be a turning point. She found herself surrounded by people who were just as eager to explore and share stories. Together, they wandered cobblestone streets, admired the ocean views, and bonded over dinners filled with laughter and warmth. Trying something new doesn't have to mean traveling far. It could be as simple as taking a cooking class, trying your hand at painting, or even learning a new language. The beauty of stepping outside your comfort zone lies in the unexpected joys it brings. For Margaret, the trip not only gave her new memories, but also a newfound sense of confidence. It reminded her that no matter your age, life still has surprises waiting if you're willing to take that first step. 14. Celebrate the small wins. As Margaret reflected on her journey, she realized how much she had accomplished. From rekindling old passions to building new friendships, each step had been a victory in its own right. But rather than wait for a grand milestone, she made a conscious effort to celebrate every small win along the way. One of her favorite traditions became her Sunday evening gratitude hour. She'd pour herself a cup of tea, sit in her cozy reading nook, and jot down 3 things she was proud of or grateful for from the week. Sometimes it was something as simple as baking a loaf of bread or enjoying a conversation with a neighbor. Other times it was bigger, like joining that travel group or finishing a quilt for charity. Celebrating small wins helps you focus on progress rather than perfection. It reminds you that every step forward, no matter how small, is worth acknowledging. For Margaret, this practice became a source of pride and positivity, fueling her motivation to keep going. So whether it's treating yourself to your favorite dessert after completing a goal or sharing your success with a friend, don't underestimate the power of celebration. It's a beautiful way to honor your journey and keep moving forward. 15. Look to the future with hope. As Margaret sat on her front porch one sunny afternoon, she thought about how far she'd come. The quiet that once felt heavy now brought her peace. The solitude that once felt isolating now felt like a chance to reflect and recharge. And the life that once felt stagnant was now vibrant with activity, connection, and growth. What made the biggest difference wasn't just the actions she took. It was the mindset she embraced. Margaret chose to see this chapter of her life as a beginning, not an end. She chose hope over resignation, curiosity over fear, and action over hesitation. Looking to the future with hope doesn't mean ignoring the challenges of aging. It means facing them with resilience and optimism. For Margaret, hope became her guiding light, helping her see possibilities rather than limitations. If you're wondering how to cultivate this mindset, start by asking yourself, what am I excited about? What new opportunities can I explore? By focusing on what lies ahead, you can shift your perspective and open yourself up to the endless potential of life's next chapter. So what's the moral of a Margaret story? Life after 70 isn't just about living. It's about thriving, laughing, and grabbing joy by the horns. Now it's your turn. Pick a tip, take a step, and let the magic happen. Oh, and don't forget, comment below and share your adventure. Let's cheer each other on. Party Popper.